this age of globalization, most of the developed countries will face various challenges in terms of political, economic, and social. Income disparity is one of the global issues that often occur all around the world. As one of the countries that take this problem seriously, Malaysia has taken steps to address this issue. As we know, one of them is the provision of BRIM, the assistance to the low-income group, and many others. So, before we go further, let us discuss what exactly income disparity is. Income disparity, or in other words, income inequality, is how unevenly income is distributed throughout a population, which means the less equal the distribution, the higher income inequality is. Some ways to show the different levels of income inequality, such as by classes of race, gender, occupation, and the most popular one is between the urban and rural area. Moving on to the measurement. How does we measure the income disparity? Well, there were actually some of the methods that used by the economists for the measurement. The first one is the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is a statistical indicator of a population's economic disparity. The coefficient calculates the dispersion of income or wealth distribution among a population's members. The next one is Atkinson index. When wages are perfectly distributed, Atkinson values can be used to measure the proportion of total income that will be needed to maintain the same degree of social welfare as now. Some other method, which is CV, coefficient of variation, and the Thiel index, were seldomly used because it does not calculate the income disparity for the whole country, instead only for individuals in a certain population.
Next, where does income disparity occurs? Basically, income disparity occurs around the world, but we specifically focus on Malaysia. Therefore, based on United Nations Human Development Report in 2004, stated that Malaysia has the highest income disparity in the Asia. However, in the Global Wealth Report 2018, published by the Credit Suisse Research Institute, show that Malaysia is no longer the highest income disparity in the Asia, but Thailand, which is also ranked 4th in the world ranking. This data was measured by Gini coefficient. However, the latest Malaysia's income disparity in 2019, reported by the Department of Statistics Malaysia, is increased despite the median household income rises to RM5.87. As you can see, when it comes to gross income, income disparity in Malaysia rises from 0.399 in 2016 to 0.407 in 2019. And when it comes to disposable income, income disparity in Malaysia increases from 0.391 in 2016 to 0.393 in 2019. The gap is still huge because the level of wage differences in the society of Malaysia is still large despite the high after-tax implementation towards the riches. Next, why does income disparity occurs? In general, income disparity occurs because there is difference in the level of income between the people of Malaysia. Truth to be told, reasonable level of inequality is not bad to occur, since it helps economic growth. But from social point of view, inequality will lead to severe economic, social and political problems if there is no government intervention. Also, the neoliberal economic policy embarked by Malaysia back in 1983, which allowed free market economic to control how wealth is distributed, can increase inequality if there is no effective mechanism to distribute wealth. Next, society in Malaysia is divided into 3 categories, which are top 20% known as T20, middle 40% known as M40, and bottom 40% which is known as P40. Based on the report by the Hazana Research Institute in 2018, the gap between T20 and B40 has doubled between 1995 and 2016. while increasing in minimum wage will help the B40 earnings to grow faster than growth of average income level, T20 are earning a great deal more for a much more longer timeline. Thus, will make the B40 to have worked hard to increase the wage for another decade. Past government not recognize the relative poverty as a social problem, thus lead to the neglected of the sharp increase in relative income between the richest and poorer that at the end widen the gap between those categories.
Let's talk about the factors that causes income disparity in Malaysia. First, we have the level of education. Higher investment in education makes it easier for people to apply for job opportunities with stable income. Commonly known, doctors make more money than Grab drivers. This is because the higher they pay for the job, the higher the level of skills and knowledge usually required. As you can see in Malaysia, the transition rate from primary to secondary education is lower than other countries, which is at only 91% compared to other countries which are mostly above 99%. Thus, increased gaps in academic achievement and educational attainments have accompanied the growth in the income inequality. Next is the distribution of wealth. We could see that there is a huge income disparity between the ethnics in Malaysia. This can be caused by wealth because wealth is transferable while income is not, and the ownership of wealth contributes significantly to income earning as it is a source of investment. The Chinese has dominated the rich minority group because of the wealth that has been passed down to them by the generations before them. In this graph, we could see that the highest percentage of ethnic that does not own financial assets is Bumiputra and Indian. This number shows that the majority of Malaysians has no saving, no investment assets, and no financial assets. Next factor is the taxes imposed on the high-income community in Malaysia. The high-income earners is only taxed at 30% in Malaysia, which is relatively low compared to other Asian countries such as Thailand at 35% and South Korea at 38%. According to Budget 2021, there is a 1% reduction in tax rate for the RM50,001 ringgit to RM70,000 tax bracket. This will benefit the M40 and T20 groups, which will see their tax bill reduced up to RM200 next year. But even though the tax rate for the low-income earners are low, their real income is still lesser than the income gathered by the high-income earners after tax. The population that makes up the lower income household will still be more susceptible to economic shocks and the rising cost of living. Lastly, we have the factor of trade and globalization. According to hypotheses by scholars, including David H. Author, increases in trade and offshoring is a cause for income inequality. For example, if Malaysia cannot import cheaper palm oil from elsewhere, there will be a contraction in the domestic supply and a fall in employment and real income in that industry. Referring to the data acquired, we can see the imports in Malaysia this year is increasing rapidly and beating the market consensus every month. Although trade based on comparative advantage has the potential to stimulate economic growth and lift per capita incomes, it can also lead to a rise in relative poverty.
A widening income gap between groups, ethnic, state, as well as rural and urban areas is a major challenge faced by the country. What do you really mean when we say that there is a growing income disparity in our country? But before we get into it, we must know that over the years, the well-being of Malaysians has improved. For the past 24 years, from 1995 to 2019, Malaysian median household income has increased from RM1,377 to RM5,873. From this figure, we can say people start to gain more income, but the reality is not the same for all Malaysians. Malaysia is divided based on household income, which is the top 20%, the middle 40%, and the bottom 40%. In 2009, median income for B40 group was RM1,524, and in 2019, the median income has increased to roughly RM3,166. On the other hand, the T20 group increased from RM8,220 in 2009 to RM15,301 in 2019. For the past 10 years, the median income for the B40 group increased by RM1,642, while the T20 group increased by RM7,081. From the data, it could say that all the groups are making more money, but the T20 group's share are just growing faster. Consequently, the gap between the T20 and the B40 keeps getting bigger and bigger. Now let's move on to the income disparity among the ethnic in Malaysia. In the Household Income and Basic Amenities Survey Report 2019, the Department of Statistics in Malaysia described that the wide economic gap between the ethnic as one of the nation's biggest challenges. And from the survey, Bumiputra or Malays' median household income was significantly lower than other ethnic groups, where Chinese recorded the greatest median household income in 2019 at 7,391 ringgit, while Indian and Malay recorded 5,981 ringgit and 5,420 ringgit respectively. Let's discuss the disparity that exists across the state in Malaysia. We are going to look at the median household income by each state. According to the report prepared by Department of Statistics Malaysia, the median household income differs from state to state, and the differences between each state are quite significant. Based on 2019 survey, Kuala Lumpur had the highest recorded median household income at nearly 10,549 ringgit, followed with the second highest state, which is Wilayah Persekutuan Putrajaya with median 9,983 ringgit. Putrajaya also had the highest annual growth rate of median income at 6.3% over the period of 2016 to 2019. And most of the states in Malaysia have median income around 4,000 ringgit to 6,000 ringgit. And the lowest on the list is Kelantan, where the median household income is 3,563 ringgit. From the data, the median income in Kuala Lumpur is more than double than Kelantan, or in other words, the income gap is very huge between these two states, which is about 6,986 ringgit. In Malaysia, when we talk about the income in rural and urban areas, there is also a huge income gap between these two strata. Looking at the graph, even though the median household income in a rural area rose from 2,372 ringgit in 2012 to 3,828 ringgit in 2019, but it has consistently remained lower than in urban area over this period. Urban area record a higher pay each year, and in 2019, the household income in urban area is 71% higher than rural areas. Urban areas also recorded a greater annual growth rate at 3.8% increase in median income from 5,860 ringgit in 2016 to 6,561 ringgit in 2019. For rural area, there is an increase of 3.3% from 3,471 ringgit in 2016 to Rm 3,820 ringgit in 2019. And what should be concerned is about the growing disparity between the income of people living in rural areas versus those in urban areas. In 2012, the difference between the median income of rural household versus urban household was 1,866 ringgit, and the figure grew to Rm 2,733 ringgit in 2019.